I always thought I'd live abroad. I've got a child, which is brilliant. He's the best thing in my life, but I hadn't quite envisaged life being like that. Why am I still carrying around that 19-year-old story? If somebody's talking about kind of confidence and feeling a bit like an imposter, often it's a case that their self-view hasn't updated. Who am I now? And really, I guess in some ways it's the masters that I did in positive psychology that's got me interested in what it means to live a really good life and what that looks like in terms of happiness and well-being. And I came across this idea of the U-bend of life, basically. It's less about knocking things down and it's more about keeping going, doing good stuff, much more incremental, refinding yourself, keeping going and knowing that there's brighter times ahead.
Hi, Jess. Welcome to this episode of Unstoppable Women. I am the host, Julie Tague, and I get the honour and privilege of sitting down with amazing women like yourself and hearing about their stories and their lessons and advice for other women listening in. To get us started, you are Jess Annison and you are executive coach, author and facilitator. And you've got a length of experience in working with people around midlife career pivots and supporting them to really find a fulfilling and meaningful career. When we talked about what this episode would be, a lot of it really comes back to identity. And this was something that resonates so much because I hear this time and again in the women that I speak to. And it's something that I have felt so strongly in my experience as well. And unlike some of the other stories I've covered where there's a big eruption and something huge catastrophic happens and people have to rebuild forward, the thing I think you're going to talk about today is those gradual seasonal changes and what that means over time. And you and I, we talked about this concept of almost women being like a master juggler. As you go on in life, you get more balls thrown at you and you're juggling more and more and more. And how do you find yourself in all of that? How do you stay true to your own identity? And that was something that really, really resonated with me and I know will resonate with our listeners. So to get us started, please introduce yourself and tell us who is Jess Annison.
Oh, thank you, Julie, and thank you so much for having me on. The privilege is mine. So I'm Jess. I'm an executive coach. I'm an author. I'm a facilitator. I had a 15-year career in organisational change, major projects, prior to making a bit of a pivot about 5 or 6 years ago. And I might talk a little bit later about kind of what was underpinning that and what it's led to. And nowadays I work with people, often sort of mid-career, senior people, public sector and beyond. My previous career was largely in the public sector. So I've got sort of a particular affinity to civil servants and people working in higher education, but now work with them and others across a range of different organisations, predominantly on career stuff. But of course, career is just one aspect of life. And so quite often our work together, whether it's coaching, team coaching, leads into other stuff that's happening, whether that's identity, meaning and purpose, well-being. And I really like creating spaces where people can work out what a good life means for them and how work forms part of that and really take the steps towards it. So thrilled to be here and able to say a little bit about my story so far.
And I love your background. It really speaks to me. I also have a huge civil service background, worked in the public sector, and about a year ago started my own venture into building something of my own. And through doing that, I've met so many other women whose stories is all about leaving corporate, why they did that, what it meant to them. So tell us a little bit about that. Start there. How did you make that decision and to make that change, to make that leap? What was going on for you?
Yeah, so with hindsight, I can join the dots up, but at the time it felt a little bit chaotic. It felt like I was, flinging mud at walls and kind of seeing what sticks a little bit. So with the benefit of 6 years hindsight, what I can say, I think is, so this was 2018, I became a mum. I've got an 8-year-old son. And just going back after maternity leave, I just didn't quite feel like I had the energy or the motivation wasn't quite there in the same way. I'd had a little bit of a difficult experience prior to going on maternity leave in quite a difficult transformation program. Lots of things were going wrong. The culture was particularly challenging. And so going on maternity leave was a massive relief because it got me out of that. But it meant that I think I was kind of uncertain about what I was going back into. And a couple of seeds had been sown about how I'd had 15 years working for organisations that had felt really important to me. But actually, perhaps there was something else. Perhaps there was something that I could create on my own. I could do something different. Maybe I could build something that was less reliant on being part of a big organisation. I'd always been really interested in coaching. I think because as I become more senior, I'd had to adapt my management style. I was always kind of like the classic micromanager, really interested in what everyone was doing, and I had to have my fingers involved in telling people how to do it. And as I became more senior, thank God, I realised, and I think some people told me, you've got to change your management style, Jess. You've got to be much more coaching, facilitative, create the conditions for other people. And so I'd worked on that as a manager first and foremost. But what I realised was actually I just really liked coaching, and it didn't matter whether it was coaching my team or other people. And so a couple of years after I went back from maternity leave, I thought, okay, if I'm going to take the leap, I need to do it now. And I went part-time. My employer at the time was really great. And we agreed that I'd go down to basically 70% and I'd use that other 30% to, let's be honest, play around really with having a coaching business. Could I find clients? Would they pay me any money? Did I actually enjoy it? Or did I just like the idea of it? So I did that for a year. And then at that point, I thought, okay, time to take the next bit of the gradual, it's like easing yourself into a swimming pool when it's really cold, isn't it? You've got to get in a little bit and then a little bit more.
Yeah.
So after that, I thought, okay, I feel brave enough to give up full-time employment. And I actually did a master's course, a 1 year's master's course in coaching psychology and applied positive psychology. And again, that was a little bit of a safety net because I felt, okay, you're doing a 12-month master's, working alongside it. If you can't make the coaching business work at the end of that 12-month period, you've only been out of the job market and the corporate world for 12 months. You can probably back yourself to get another role. But by the end of that 12 months, I was really loving it. I built a business. I was bringing in, sufficient income. And that's it, really. I kind of just continued along that line, proceed until apprehended, proceed until, I can't do it or somebody tells you not to. And somehow 5 years later, I'm still here doing work I really love with a huge amount more autonomy and independence, which I have realised really matters to me. And that wasn't a driving force at the time, but actually with hindsight really matters to me. And I frankly now feel I couldn't be employed again. I think I'm far too feral to be constrained within a job description or expectations of how to be at work. So that's been the change.
So this is really interesting to me because I think you approached it in the way that many people almost wish they could, which is the dropping down a few hours on one, dipping your toe in the water. So you've still got a bit of security, and how fantastic that was something you were able to navigate. How did you literally start out then in doing that? Like, how did you start to reach out and get your own clients and build all your own business?
Oh, really slow and steady. I think I did a couple of Facebook posts in the first instance where I said I'd got my coaching qualification. So I'd done a number of practice hours unpaid with people.
Yeah.
And the next step was to say, I'm a really new coach and I want to build up my hours and I'll charge you £20 for an hour's coaching. And I got a couple of people. And then I'd say, £50 for an hour's coaching, just pushing the boundaries just a little bit. A lot of my initial clients came through recommendations, referrals, friends that would say, oh, you want a coach? Actually, my friend Jess is just starting out, she'll be good value. She's probably all right, and started it in that way. So hugely grateful to those friends and people in my network. But there's no way of doing it without just getting out there a little bit and being vulnerable. So
Yeah. Talk us through a little bit then about what's been going on for you in life these last 8 years then. So you became a mum, you then started out building your own business, you're married, and tell us a bit more about what's going on, because your story really is this case of the gentle shifts and turns that happen through life and how that leads us to, I guess, at some point tap into who are we and our identity.
Yeah, I feel a bit of a phony in some ways, Julie, being on your podcast because, lots of your stories, the women that you've spoken to have got these really sort of quite significant, critical moments where things change. And I don't think I've had that. I've had a bit of a career change, a little bit of a health scare. We needed IVF to conceive. So there was a bit of a sort of a fertility journey going on. So nothing really significantly difficult or traumatic, but actually as all of these things kind of layer up, you do get to that bit, just as you mentioned with the spinning plates where you think, oh, wow, there's a whole lot of stuff that's happened. And who am I now? I know I'm spinning all of these plates. I know I'm, mixing my metaphors, juggling the balls and all of this kind of thing. who am I? And really, I guess in some ways, it's the master's that I did in positive psychology that's got me interested in what it means to live a really good life and what that looks like in terms of happiness and well-being. And I came across this idea of the U-bend of life, basically. Lots and lots of scientific studies show reflects the relationship between happiness, how satisfied we feel with life, and age. And actually, what they've shown over lots of years, various different countries, so it's not a culture-specific thing necessarily, is that we're happiest in our 20s, earlier 30s. There's quite a significant decline then in terms of happiness during the 40s, but from early 50s, it goes back up to more or less the same level. So you've got this kind of U curve or U-bend of happiness. And of course, there's been lots of stuff, midlife crises have kind of got this sort of slightly, the pastiche of buying a sports car or having an affair or getting tattoos or whatever. But actually, I think what the science kind of points to is that there is something that happens at this stage of life, I'm 43, where actually it feels quite difficult. You might have aging parents, caring responsibilities, work can feel quite tough. You've probably still got a fairly sizable mortgage. Retirement and the freedoms of all of that feel out of reach. They're too far away. But also the young, free singleness of being 20s, early 30s also feels like quite far away. And I guess my reflections on that, my experience of this is, over the last couple of years, just getting to that point where, oh, okay, I don't quite feel as sort of high energy, as happy, as full of optimism as I used to. Is that okay? And actually, I think what I'm realizing and noticing is it's really normal, but also it can do weird things for our sense of identity, our sense of meaning and purpose. And so as I'm working with people who are going through these kind of shifts, I've been sort of noticing the parallels in myself as well. So yeah, no dramatic crisis that I've had to sort of, like a phoenix from the flames kind of come back from, but more a gradual noticing of how life is and how life could be. And perhaps a sort of what's the right way of putting it? Perhaps just a sort of an increasing desire for myself to take more agency, I guess, of how I want life to be going forwards.
And these are all stories that will be relatable to other women. And I love the way you're articulating this. In some of that science you were talking about, is there a difference between how men and women experience? Is this a general phase of life for all of us?
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? You would expect there to be a difference, but actually there isn't. So the main, he's actually an economist rather than a psychologist, but the main economist that's looked at this data, and it's longitudinal data, 20, 30 years worth of data, lots and lots of different countries. He says exactly the same. You would expect it to be different for men or for women. There must be a hormonal element or a, caring responsibilities element. But actually, by and large, that doesn't really appear to be there. It's as true for men as it is for women. I think as a woman, it does feel different. I'm definitely perimenopausal. So my body is now kind of doing odd things and feeling different to how it was before. I'm a mum, so I've got kind of, caring responsibilities there. My husband is great in all sorts of ways, and yet the the domestic labor of organizing stuff, making sure everyone's okay, does still fall primarily to me, I would say. And then you've got that parent responsibility as well. Both of my parents are quite ill, needing much more support and attention and care. And again, I've got a brother, he's great, but I do think there's different expectations, even if they're just sort of self-driven. There's a different expectation of being, the elder daughter that needs to be, accompanying for hospital appointments or checking in to make sure, the important bill's been paid or whatever. So yeah, it's interesting. The data doesn't say it's different, but I do think there's a gender aspect or a different perspective that many women would find.
That's really interesting, because the more that I have these conversations with women, I am so conscious about the need for these conversations amongst men. And I say that as someone with two brothers. Half of my best friends are male. I've been so fortunate in the life I've had. Around 18, I fell into a group of friends through my husband who are now some of my best friends, and they're male. So I have experiences of seeing stories both ways. I've also heard some really tragic stories of men's mental health in recent years around this age bracket. And it makes me believe that challenge at this age range, that U-bend you talk about, is not unique just to women. I do feel that we deal with it in different ways. So even when I look at my partner, he has three children, stepchildren, but they're older. They're three boys and they're in their late teens now. And he has had a real moment since I met him 5 years ago of, oh, the kids are getting older and they don't need me, and like, who am I now if I'm not kind of dad picking the kids up and feeding them all the time and taking them out? They're now suddenly doing their own thing. And that, in my words, I said to him, you're having an identity crisis, like who are you? But he would never have seen it that way. I've heard other stories of males that really coping and finding different slightly unhealthy ways to cope with some of what they're going through. And one of the things I come back to is how good we are as women at talking. Part of the desire for me to grow this podcast is that ability to talk and connect about all the stories that we all experience, especially at this time of life. I do think we do experience different things going on. As you said, perimenopause in so many of the women. I'm also 43. It's a topic that everybody talks about now because it's, there's things starting to happen. It's like going through puberty all over again. What on earth is going on with me? What's going on with my body? I've spent 40 years getting used to myself and knowing myself inside out, and now suddenly something else is coming along and impacting on me. And I've got a child that I'm growing, and she's such a young age, and trying to show her that. And I've moved in next door to my parents in their 70s now, who are, thank God, so fit and healthy. But there's so many of those balls that we're juggling, right? And I think as women, we do have a bit of a special gift in how we deal with them and the way that we connect. How have you seen through your work? Do you work more with men or women? How have you seen some of those different dynamics?
So I work with both men and women, and I would say there's probably a slightly higher majority of it being women, maybe 60-40, but it's more or less the same. I absolutely agree about kind of dealing with stuff differently. Women, I think, are much more likely to have that social support. We're more used to talking about feelings, mental health, what's going on for us. I think we're probably a bit better at reaching out just to say, hi, thinking of you, even if we're sort of some distance away and it's just the occasional WhatsApp. I think men tend to be a little bit more insular, kind of handling or not things differently. But I think the underlying themes are often really quite similar. At this age, often, this is the point at which we realise the aspirations that we might have had at 20. We're getting a sense of, are they going to come true or not? I was super ambitious when I was 20, really wanted to kind of make my mark, do great stuff. And I'd say, for the first part of my career, I really did. I did some great stuff. I'm super proud of what I achieved. And I've taken decisions since then, which I would make again and again. I don't think I've made wrong decisions, but they've led me to a place where actually, you're not, you're not going to fulfill those aspirations at 20. And on one level, I'm really happy with that because I know why I've made the decisions I've made. But I never thought I'd have a child. When my friends and I did this thing when we were 18, it was sort of we made a list. The list physically exists somewhere. I don't know who's got it. We need to find it. But it's like most likely to be famous, most likely to have 3 children, most likely to have this, most likely to do that. And in all of those ones, I was ambitious, very independent, definitely not a mum, probably single. And I had quite strong female role models that were like that in my life. I had 2 aunties that were power women, living their best lives, traveling around the world, and really quite exciting. That felt right then. And as I say, I don't regret or would do differently any of the decisions that have made me not that. But now I'm like, oh, wow, I'm living in a village in suburbia, life is quite a lot smaller. I'm in the UK. I always thought I'd live abroad. I've got a child, which is brilliant. He's the best thing in my life, but I hadn't quite envisaged life being like that. I still do work I'm really proud of, but it's not leading an organisation. I'm not the CEO of something. I haven't, achieved some of those quite probably naive goals back then. But I guess there's a certain letting go and being okay with all of that I've only recently kind of got into. I had some therapy last year, which was super helpful in that, because I think often we don't really appreciate what really matters to us. We implicitly know what our values are. And I think I've always implicitly known that these sorts of things are important. But it was through the process of that counselling and those conversations that I realised that actually independence was a super big thing, really, really important for me. And as I say, like with hindsight, I think that's driven quite a lot of my career decisions to set up on my own, to not be part of a corporate world anymore. But there's other ways in which it plays out where I like being a bit different. I don't mind being on my own. I'm quite happy to do things that run against the grain a little bit because I'm me and I know my own mind. And that feels like something I've lost along the way a little bit, and only, as I say, in the last year or two have come back to. So yeah, a bit of a process of relearning kind of who I am and what matters to me.
So that bit that you talked about, that realization, the questioning of, I thought I was going to be here and I'm not quite there. How did you come to terms with that? Because I've definitely been there. And I've been there in big moments when all my other friends started having second children. At the point I found myself on my own, and I thought I desperately wanted that, and it was not an option for me anymore. Finding myself single income and not, knowing that if there'd been two of us, I would have had double the money, and life would have been full of the holidays and extra classes for my daughter and all the other things that I thought were mine as a given. How did you come to terms with that? Because I know that will be something that many of us will sit and question at times. I thought I'd be here. I'm not quite there. That's not the life that I've got. And I've had to go through that journey. How did you get there?
That's a great question. And I think I'm not 100% sure that I'm out the other side. I think it's a bit of a work in progress. The therapy was definitely super helpful. Like that, I think was really quite transformative for me in terms of taking stock, maybe at a slightly superficial level, but I think I've always been quite good at kind of counting my blessings and being grateful and recognizing things. But I think kind of really trying to lean into that, recognize what I'm achieving and recognize that where the stories I've told myself are kind of old stories. Why am I still carrying around that, 19-year-old story, so that was 1943. So 24 years later, of course, that wasn't quite right. That person was really young and, hadn't really got a sense of who she was and all of that sort of thing. So there's something about kind of consciously changing the stories a little bit. I've sometimes in my work, if somebody's talking about kind of confidence and feeling a bit like an imposter, often it's a case that their self-view hasn't updated, if that makes sense.
I think some of those stories are always backwards looking, aren't they? I look backwards and I say, this is the person I am. It's really hard to look forwards because that's almost like people see that as manifesting or it's something that we want to do in future. But in all the reading I've done, a lot of who we are and who we become starts with the simple actions.
Yeah.
And unless we change that and we consciously decide this is who I am and what I do, we always will keep looking back. And when you keep looking back, you just repeat the stories of old. So I'm a big believer in storytelling language and for me reframing how we see things. That's what I hear in some of what you say. You've had that ability, which is a beautiful ability, and I definitely see not everyone can do it, in counting your blessings, being grateful for the things that happen, big or small, doesn't matter how tiny they are, being grateful for those moments of achievement, of joy that we get, right? But the ability to reframe and re-look and carve out a new story, I think can often be really challenging for people.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree. I think that reframing is hard. And even if we can do it initially, it hasn't yet sort of filtered into our subconscious. It's not automatic. And so the old story will pop back in and then that will make us kind of feel, oh goodness, I'm still in that loop. I think it's very much a work in progress and being clearer about what success looks like now. And so actually, from a work perspective, work is different to how I imagined it, but I'm still achieving loads of good stuff. There are things that objectively anyone else would go, but that's amazing. And I'm like, oh yeah, it is really good. And I'm kind of reminding yourself of your successes, reminding yourself of what you're achieving. It's not less, it's just different, basically.
There's something really interesting in so many women compare themselves to others, and I definitely do. I compare myself to others a lot. I think in high achieving women, there's also a double challenge of comparing yourself to yourself and what you thought you should have done or where you thought you should be and not letting up on yourself. A therapist I used to see, she used to challenge me all the time and she'd say, would you talk to a friend the way that you talk to yourself? Would you have that narrative with someone that you love in the way that you talk to yourself? And I would beat myself up so much. I wanted to be here and I'm here, and that wasn't good enough. I did it when I ran the marathon the other week. I wanted 4 hours and I got 4 hours 18, and I knew that I would do it. And I've had to really work at, had a good day, I finished, I stayed on my feet, which is a massive thing for me. I got to the finish line. So that work on reframing our stories is something that really speaks to me. Now, I wanted to ask you, you ran a retreat last year, and this is something that was really close to my heart because I ran my first retreat, and a lot of what I talk to other women about is this idea of stories, of language, narrative, changing how we look at things, trying to think about, are those stories outdated? Do we need a new story? Tell me about your retreat. This is something that I hear lots of other women wanting to embark on. Tell us us about how you did that, what it was for, and some of your lessons.
Yeah, so it was such a great experience. I absolutely loved it. To be honest, the reason I did it was because a friend of mine, a brilliant lady called Susie, we used to work together. We loved working together. We've not worked with each other for probably 8, 9, 10 years, something along those lines. And we just wanted to do something fun together that was sort of semi-work related. Well, we knew we'd work together as a good pair. We just thought, well, let's do one, see how it goes. We'll enjoy it. Hopefully other people will get something from it. And it was fantastic. So we found a really lovely venue. So we were in Montenegro, kind of just south of Croatia. Beautiful place, views of mountains, really lovely kind of environment to be in. And we created this idea that we just wanted to bring together a group of people. We didn't have a very sort of niche focus. It was very much about, you know, kind of unpack, rewind, reset, restore a little bit. We put the offer out to see who might be interested, and we gathered together a group of people who, incidentally, all women and all very much in kind of midlife. I think we ranged from 40 to 50 in terms of the age bracket, not by design, just by chance. And it was beautiful, really, really lovely. People kind of being able to work through whatever they were bringing, really. In some instances, it was kind of like a relationship situation. Other people just needed a good rest and a bit of a reset. Others wanting to make some kind of change, you know, maybe work related, step up a level, put themselves out of their comfort zone. And we facilitated, you know, a variety of conversations, activities that enabled people to ease into that. We had a little bit of the obligatory yoga, not delivered by us. We are definitely not yoga teachers, but we had a fantastic lady come and do that bit for us. And it was just great to be with people, you know, to have those conversations that get under the skin of things. I have a very close group of friends, and often we're so busy catching up about how are the kids, how's your brother, how's work, that we don't then have that slightly, you know, deeper quality of conversation. And sometimes it's easier to have that maybe with strangers. So yeah, that was one of the things that I absolutely loved about what Susie and I created. Yeah, and maybe we'll create again. We're not doing one this year, but we've tentatively said we'll do one next year.
I think I read about it on LinkedIn, and I think I've connected with Susie as well.
Fantastic.
She's changed
She
in the
is.
change
Susie
space.
Palmer-True. Yeah, she's fabulous.
Yes. Yes. So I read about that. I think it is just amazing, anyone doing something in this space where, as you say, I found the same thing, being away with a group of women that were strangers, actually going through the same sorts of things. They're experiencing the same sort of life twists and turns and wanting to do something about it. So you instantly just connect with them. And I found that space to have really deep connections, to share, has created almost a friendship group with the women that I met that has been so beautiful over this last year. And it really did touch me in a way that I came back feeling actually quite humbled of what we achieved. And I think I saw some of the same from what you achieved last year with Susie. So just well done. I think anyone in this space that is able to do something like that and to bring those moments of connection to others who are, whatever their stories, going through the same things. It is caring, juggling life, wanting more health, figuring out who we are as we change, right? Those are the same things we're all going through, regardless of the ups and downs or what might be happening around the edges. So massive well done.
Oh, thank you.
So Jess, I always end these conversations asking about what is an unstoppable woman. So tell me in your own words, how do you see a woman that is unstoppable?
I think, and perhaps this echoes the theme of the conversation, I think 20 years ago I'd have said, you know, breaking down walls, ripping through glass ceilings, making that massive impact. And I think 20 years later, it's a lot slower and steadier. It's less about knocking things down, and it's more about actually keeping going, doing good stuff, much more incremental. Feels less dramatic, less exciting, but actually more meaningful, more satisfying. So I think for me, you know, an unstoppable woman in this U-bend of life is really about refinding yourself, keeping going, and knowing that there's brighter times ahead, I guess.
Yeah, that is a constant theme that I keep hearing about. Just keep going and finding out about yourself. Just take every opportunity to keep exploring and figuring it out, because it's a wonderful journey to go on. You have a question left for you from Franca van der Pol, who was the last guest on this episode. And Franca talked about her journey through life. She was a bodybuilder, actually loves exercise, but she went through a really challenging incident with her foot where she needed needed repeat surgery on it. She divorced from her husband. She was growing 2 young children in the home, and she embarked on a whole world of online dating, which she writes about in very colourful ways. But during this time, she found out and she had a diagnosis of ADHD, which for her, the reason it really resonated was it helped her to find out about herself and to understand who she was. Now, her question, which hopefully you can sense from the journey that she's been on, is when you look at your life, what do you truly desire in that life? When you strip back all the expectations from others, all the weight of responsibility, what is it that you truly desire?
Oh my word, what a big and amazing question. Oh, it's hard, isn't it? Because there's lots of things. I think the word that comes to mind most and probably works over a few levels is peace. Just, obviously macro peace, peaceful communities and countries and the world at peace. But on a much, much more micro level, just moments of peace where actually you can just sit and be okay and look round at what you're creating and feel comfortable and grateful, I guess, for those moments. So yeah, peace, I think, is probably the word that best sums it up for me. Health and happiness and all of that good stuff as well. But I think peace probably is the right flavour.
I think I spent about 5-6 years in my life where that was my exact response to that question. If ever anyone asked me what I wanted, I'd said, I just want peace. I want peace in my own head. I want some moments of peace around me. I want times in the day where there's not this chaos and storm around me. It was probably not there, but it felt like it was there. And what's beautiful is I still think that, but I have managed to find pockets of that in life now, which is such a beautiful place to aspire to. That was my benchmark, was I just want to find moments of peace each day where I have calm. Might not last for the whole day, but
invariably
just
won't.
those moments. So I think that is a beautiful thing to have desire for in our lives. Now tell me, what's your question then for the next guest?
It's only a question that's as good as Franca's, because that really was a lovely one. I guess it's a bit of a classic coaching question perhaps, but what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail?
Oh, that's interesting. What would your answer to that be?
What would I do if I knew I couldn't fail? I should have thought of this first, shouldn't I? First, should have thought of my first answer. It's a tricky one.
My instant answer goes, I'd do everything.
Yeah, no.
And that's not a good one. I would quit everything and I would go and start a life abroad of my own. I would build the own career, but it feels like tearing up so much. There's so many ties for me here that I really cherish in terms of family and friends that are such a beautiful, they're like my number one family and friends. It almost prevents me doing anything to rock that boat because I spent so many years of my life on my own with my daughter, and now to have the network around me. But I definitely think there's something for me about travel and world experience, which is when you and I first met and you were talking from Spain. I was like, that's a beautiful image.
No, and I think so travel came to mind. Having a life abroad, I think is something that I would love to do, and at the moment feels like it's kind of out of reach. It might be something that's possible later, but not kind of in the short to medium term. So I think that could be a really good answer for me as well. Work-wise, I find it quite hard to answer because I think I'm becoming better with failure. Do you know what I mean? It's like nobody loves failure, but I think where previously I might have held myself to the very highest standards, I'm now okay with the mid standard. And so actually, setting out on the retreats, for example, the goal was not to be a successful retreat runner. It was not to run, the best retreats and do it 3 or 4 times a year. It was to run one really good one. And I think, of like that slightly lower expectations, but more realistic expectations, I think I'm becoming more comfortable with.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. And I once saw a note written in London. It was on the side of a phone box, and I took a picture of it, and it's always stuck with me. And it said, "We don't fail, we win or we learn." And I just think that's such a beautiful quote for life. I try to think of that because I used to beat myself up about the concept of failure. And if part of the reframe is, if not winning, learning from everything, that means it's never been wasted.
Yeah, completely agree.
Yeah. Jess, it's been so lovely to talk to you today. Thank you so much. And I know there's so many pieces here that will really resonate with other women in particular. I love the idea of that U-bend of life as well. So thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me, Julie. It's been great.
Thank you.